Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be using today, the day of the Actabliz walkout, to look forward in the future, to a future hopefully where there's no more terrible work conditions at Blizzard and everyone working there is happy, to look forward at how to make WoW a better game than what it currently is. And I will be going over three main topics for this. Obviously, as most, forever WoW players from vanilla and stuff, I have an entire manifesto of how to make WoW better. But I will stick to three topics, and the topics are going to be endgame, quests, lore, kind of geography of the game, and then finally I'm going to be talking a little bit about the relationship between the players and the game devs, which I think is not in a good place. So we'll be going through those three things. Of course, this is just my opinion. I do believe that this is an opinion shared by many of the player base, but not all of the player base. So I know some people will probably disagree with some of the things I have to say. Anyways, let's go ahead and start with number one. Number one is going to be the endgame content. I think it's hyper important that the endgame content stays very competitive. This is what's keeping a lot of the people in the game right now, is because the rate, for example, the rate is so good. Raids are really good, especially when you try to compare it to other games. It's quite good, and you have a boss like Painsmith, which the devs did such an amazing job with Painsmith. Such a good boss. I mean, literally just whatever you learned from making that boss, apply that in the future, and it is. I mean, what a great encounter. The raids are great. They need to stay great. They need to stay competitive. Obviously, some things could be improved upon as far as Guardian and was too easy. Kalthazad was too easy to kind of trick him in a way, and then Fate Scribe was a little bit to be desired as well. And it sucked because those three are towards the back end of the dungeon or back end of the raid. But overall the raid is still actually pretty good, despite that, which is saying something, right? So the raids are great in WoW. That needs to keep happening. This is the pinnacle of the game, is the raiding. This is the best part of the game. This is the part of the game that suffered the least. This is the part of the game that might have even improved, expansion over expansion. So, great job to everybody that works on the raids. Keep that up. It's very important, because if that stops, people are going to stop playing, because it's the only reason we're sticking around. The other endgame content are PvP and Mythic Plus. Let's talk about PvP first. So PvP is actually in a pretty decent spot as well. I think the number one thing you learned, or should have learned, in this expansion is the vendor is the way to go. Everyone asked for the PvP vendor when it was taken away. Different iterations were tried, and I believe failed. So the PvP vendor is really big. This was, for whatever reason, people like a vendor. I like a vendor too, honestly. And people love having the vendor, the choice of upgrading the gear. One thing I will say that many PvP players have said is make the initial honor gear not feel quite as punishing. Maybe like the very first set you get or whatever, and maybe after you unlock a certain thing or a certain achievement, you can purchase like a token, and that token decreases the honor cost of the initial honor gear for your entire account or something like that. Just creative solutions like that to decrease the honor costs of the initial gear. I do think having high honor cost to upgrade the conquest gear is fine. I think that's fine because you're upgrading your end game gear, essentially, since it's the conquest gear. So you're upgrading that, and that's great. I'm totally fine with that. And PvP is in a pretty good spot. I would say to give even more of an opportunity for the PvP team, if there's a PvP team, Halinka as that's the most public person that people know, but allow them to keep fidgeting with the talents to make them better, to make them cooler, to adjust the meta. I think players really actually appreciate that in PvP more than maybe some other places in the game. And I think it's on a good direction now. But in past expansions, what would happen is you then take away the vendor in the next X pack. Don't do that. Keep the vendor, please. Improve upon this, because you're in the right direction already. And don't remake the wheel. You're literally just improving on the thing that already exists. I plead on that. And the last form of endgame content is Mythic Plus. So Mythic Plus is probably the least, the one that's perceived to be least worked on, or cared about, I should say. And I guess I kind of agree with that. But tons of improvements have been made, right? Valor points, good. The teleport dungeon thing's good. The mythic score in the game, good. All good things, all around, all on the right track. Obviously, at some point, there's going to have to be a way where Mythic Plus gear is at least really, really close to Mythic rating gear, if not equal to it. Even if you have to have like a really high score to unlock that, I think it has to be at least an opportunity there. Obviously, there needs to be titles and mounts for Mythic Plus, just like there is for PvP, since there's like a rating scale and everything like that. But you're on the right track there. Don't scrap that. Continue to improve upon that. The end game is, like I said at the beginning, is the part of WoW that's in the best condition. And right now it's actually in really good condition. And if you just continue on the path that you're on all three of these things, on the rating, the rating counters at least, the rating counters, the Mythic Plus, how you added the system, the scoring system, and the Valor points, and then PvP, how you have the vendor and the upgrade, the way you do the upgrades in PvP. And again, it seemed like you allowed, for a little bit more PvP specific changes in this expansion so far, without, only focusing on the PvE aspect of those changes or whatever. So continue on those lines. Do not scrap them. Do not remake the wheel. Please, oh please. Number 2. So this is one I'm probably most passionate about. And it's like the class fantasy, the lore, the quests, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, you've seen, perhaps, a lot of creators talk about, well, I just want to be in Azeroth. I just want to go back to Azeroth. And I definitely echo those sentiments. I don't mind the cosmic stuff, personally. I think it's kind of cool. But I do echo those sentiments. And I think Legion was a good example of this, because Legion is the most recent X pack that was like universal, obviously is a hyperbole, but universally loved. And I think we learned a lot of things in Legion. And probably the number one thing you can say that should have been learned, at least in Legion, is class fantasy. Everybody loves class fantasy. And I will give you an example on how much people love class fantasy, even if it completely throws an egg in the face of the other things that they say they don't like. And that's tier sets. People love tier sets. You're going to bring back tier sets, and people are going to cheer for them. And I'm going to say, and sigh and be sad, because I was the one person who liked Azerite armor, because I am one of the least lucky people in World of Warcraft history. It's very common for me not to get my tier set until like 2 months into an X pack, just as I do not have a helm currently in Chains of Domination or Sanctum of Domination raid. I do not have a helm, so I do not have unholy powers or anything like that. And who knows when I will get one. I'm very unlucky. And so people will not get their tier sets until a month or 2 months into a raid tier, just like they were not getting their shards or their sockets and complaining about it. But they'll still love them because they have class fantasy to them. Shards don't have any class fantasy to them. They don't have any fantasy to them at all. And so they get hated on. But like I said, because of class fantasy, tier sets will be loved and applauded. And, that should tell you something. That despite the same thing that they hate, that they accept these because it has class fantasy to it. Order halls in Legion. Not everybody, but most people love their order hall. As a paladin, I loved going back to Eastern Plaguelands as my order hall. That was so cool. That's where the paladin order hall was. Even though it was a new expansion, I was in a vanilla zone, in a vanilla, church or whatever, as my order hall. So that was so cool. And class fantasy is very important. Remember that. Try to mix in class fantasy everywhere you can. And I will give you even an example of something that would add class fantasy to the game. So I'm not someone who is like, we need to go back to vanilla, where we go back to our trainers and train each rank of a spell or whatever. I'm fine learning spells, just have them pop up on your bar as you level. However, I will say for new spells that are added to the game, especially higher end things. So in the next expansion, if we level from 60 to 70, I think any class spell that you learn between that, that's new, you should go back to your trainer, get a quest, and learn the spell, like actually learn the spell. And by that I mean you do a quest and it's like teaching you how to do the spell, why this, what's the point of the spell, and just giving you a little bit of that class fantasy of, hey, I had to go back to this guy, he taught me how to use this spell, now I have this spell, now I'm more powerful, and people like that. I like that. It seems like everybody likes that. So that's a way to introduce class fantasy back without having to go, like overboard, I would say, in like people say go back to the vanilla way of doing it. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's only needed for new spells. I don't think you need to go do that for every spell. But this is just one opportunity to insert class fantasy back into the game. Okay, so another thing is like zones, right? I just mentioned Eastern Plaguelands. People want to go back to the old zones. In Legion, we did this a lot. It was intertwined into our artifact weapons a lot, and I think that could be a solution going forward. I do know that this takes like resources, right? You have to make the new zones, you have to make the new continent, you have to do this and that. You have to make the new quests for those zones, and so how are you supposed to have the resources to go back and make a bunch of old stuff as well? I totally get that. I hope that there's some way, again, the theory of this video is we're building Blizzard back better, so if you need more employees to do that, hopefully that could just be the case, right? But people want to go back to the old stuff. And I'm going to offer some things that maybe not as thought about or talked about. So, for example, I am alliance bias here. So if you're a Horde player, or you identify with the Horde, just think of your equivalent of this, right? So I think it's time that the gnomes finally got Gnomergon back, for example, right? That should become a city. I know that'll take a lot of work just to make that a bustling city, and that doesn't have a bunch of leper gnomes in it anymore. And it has like an auction house and everything like that. But I think Gnomergon, is time they got their city back. The mecha gnomes can come live there with them. The dwarves, now, I mean, there's hardly any gnomes in Ironforge anyways. There's hardly anybody in Ironforge anyways. But it's time that the gnomes got their city back. The train could make a stop there as well. Gnomergon. The train could go from Ironforge to Gnomergon to Stormwind and Triangle there. I think that would be pretty cool as well. And yeah, so I think that's one example, right? Something that's been long standing that should happen 100%. And I think all the gnome players, I think it's funny to meme on the gnome players, of course, but I think all the gnome players would be pretty pumped to have their own city as well, finally. And another thing is, so kind of like story progression in a zone. And I know this is impossible to do on a full scale, like Cataclysm, right? That was a big deal. That was the entire thing. I think some bad lessons were learned from Cataclysm because like sub numbers went down and stuff. So like, oh, well, Cataclysm, that was just a bad idea. I think it's important to remember that the players who stayed actually probably liked Cataclysm to some extent, and liked like the redoing of the zones and the new quests in the zones. So, if you're trying to recapture the players who left, I think that's kind of a lost cause. I think some of them are classic Andes and will never play retail. So you should probably be thinking more along the lines of the people stayed after Cataclysm, so they actually liked it. And so one example, again, Alliance bias, is Dun Motor in the wetlands. So the changes were made to it. They were turned into Shadowforge instead of just Dark Irons because Dark Irons joined the Alliance. I totally get that. But I think after all those years of fighting outside of it, I think it's time the dwarves get Dun Motor back. It's just a little quest hub city. Maybe they send you to do some quests on the bridge. Maybe they send you to do some quests, in the very southern part of Arethi. Maybe go kill some raptors, whatever. Just a tiny little quest hub there with an ode to the lore somewhere in there, whether that's a tablet or a statue depicting maybe Sully Blue, for example. In fact, yeah, put that quest back in the game. Sully Blue is a quest from original WoW. I don't know if they got rid of it during Cataclysm or before, But off the bridge, and I talk about this a lot. It's one of my like biggest things. You jump off the bridge, Thandal span, and underneath a siege weapon on the river floor, technically an ocean, but it's kind of like a river that cuts through it. On the floor, there's a dead dwarf, and he would have a note in his hand that you could pick up. There wasn't an exclamation point over it. You could just pick up this note, and you could do a whole quest line for Sully Blue. And the end of it is you make a statue of him, and you never get to see the statue, unfortunately. It just kind of ends abruptly. But it's like this whole quest line. It was really cool. So put this quest back in the game. But change it a little bit, right? Dunmotor now has Sully Blue's friend who was fighting with him on the bridge, and he sends you to go find, to see if you could find any clues about Sully Blue or what happened to him. Maybe he doesn't know what happened to him. Be like, we were fighting on the bridge, something happened, I just want to be put to ease. You go find the note, you bring it back to him, then he sends you on this whole quest line, you make a statue, and then there's a statue of Sully Blue and Dunmotor. This is the way. This is just one example. I don't think that would be a lot of work. It's mostly just putting a quest back in the game, obviously artwork and stuff like that. But again, it's just an example. Horde people, I'm sure you can think of things that are kind of like this as well. But I would love to see that. Players would love to see this, and it's like I said. I guess the overwhelming or the underlying thought behind it is world progression. So not just character progression, but world progression, where some things in the world progress with us as we go. It's not just a new zone, but some of the old zones progress with new things as well. And I think that's something that's been lost a lot in the game. And it really hasn't happened much since the Cataclysm. And, it could, I understand you can't do it on a full scale of the Cataclysm, but I think you can do it in spurts, and you can do it in specific things and really cool things. Like I just outlined one that's very cool. And I think things like that could be added to the game. So, the last thing I want to talk about is the relationship between players and game devs. So, I think it's extremely unhealthy, frankly. I think we've seen with this whole sexual harassment scandal that many of the players, especially the online presence, are very behind the game devs. They support the game devs. So many people are not playing games today to support the game devs, and the community mostly supports you. There are some really terrible people who say really terrible things to you, and I speak up against them. Other people speak up against them. Some streamers call you incompetent every 5 seconds. And some of us try to speak up against them, although it's very dangerous to do so. And it's not great. I understand that. But there's people that aren't great to me either, and I'm a nobody. There's just not great people everywhere. You work at a grocery store, someone's going to be really mean to you, even if the last 1,000 people you saw were completely polite to you. It's going to happen. There are bad people, and you just have to block them and move on. I think you can see that most of us support you. Hopefully you see that. So this idea that the players are toxic and the players are bad and the players are a problem, I don't think is okay. I don't think it's okay to say that. Recently, somebody on the WoW team tweeted, if you're worried about content right now, you're part of the problem. And a lot of people took issue to that. I think that was the straw that broke Preach's back, for example. I think it's bullshit, frankly. It's not even those toxic players I mentioned, it's not their fault that there's sexual harassment in your office. They're not part of the problem. That's part of Jalen Brack's problem. That's part of Bobby Kodak's problem. That's part of, the senior leadership of the WoW team's problem. That's their problem. That's not the players are not part of that problem. Players are part of a toxic problem. Some of them are, but they're not part of that problem. They're not sexually harassing people. So do not say that it's the players, they're part of the problem because they want good content. I want good content too. I'm not part of the problem. I support you. I defend you. I defend you against hordes of people sometimes, just by telling them to not call you incompetent. So, no, because I want good content, I'm not part of the problem. And that's a bullshit thing to say. I know you were probably emotional when you said it. A lot of the game devs then liked that tweet as well, and that's bullshit too, frankly. You have to stop treating the players like shit. That we are your customers. We love the game. We love the game in many cases, or most cases, more than you do. And you have to stop treating us all like we're this, crappy people. It's not right. And like I said, you've seen most of us support you. Most of us go to bat. Will go to bat for you. Most of us who still play the game still find things that we like in the game, and we try to give credit to those devs. I mean, I can name some of my favorite devs, like Taryn Gregory, cinematics, absolutely amazing. Chrissy Golden, some people don't like her for whatever reason. I think her storytelling is very good. Steve Denuser, again, storytelling is very good. I actually don't mind Ion that much, but even though a lot of people like to meme on him, I actually don't mind him at all. I think a lot of the people there are quite good, and a lot of us go to bat for you, but I don't think it's okay for you to then lump all the players together all the time. That's not right. Now, there is more adversary than that. In game, there's a lot of adversarial nature as well, and it's like punishing players. This idea that you have to punish the players. So, shards of domination is a good example. It should not be possible to delete your shards of domination. It shouldn't. I know there's a little prompt that pops up, but it should not be possible. It's a punishment for the players. As soon as this was found that it could happen, it should have been fixed somehow, some way. There's all kinds of instances of this in the game where the players are just punished if they don't do something, or if they do something, and it's high time that ends. This isn't in vanilla. I think there's in classic Andes. Some of them actually appreciate being punished, because the game's supposed to be hard, and it's supposed to be this, and it's supposed to be that. But in modern times, the people who still play the game, we don't want to be punished anymore. We just don't. Stop punishing us for playing the game. Stop punishing us for taking a break from the game. Make all the catch-up systems good, so we're not punished for taking a break. And stop punishing us for playing the game a lot as well. It's exhausting. And that type of relationship has to stop in-game as well. And I know there's reasons for it. It's to create friction, to create engagement, like you're going up against something. I understand all of that, but I think pretty much no games do that anymore. And while it has been super successful for a while, I think it's time to stop punishing players that way. Punish us with Painsmith. Painsmith is punishing. That's a good punishment. That's because that's a really good boss, right? So yeah, it's punishing when high-end raiders, the best raiders, can't figure out how to do the spikes on Painsmith correctly because there's a million other things going on. And then after like 50, 70 pulls or whatever, they finally are doing it right every time. That's punishing. That's good. That's friction. That's a good way to do it. Deleting your shards of domination is not good. That's not good in any way. So I just highly urge them to stop doing the punishing of the player type thing. It's not good. No one else does it. And I think that would make a lot of people a lot more happy, frankly, and bring people back to the game too, that quit because they're finally sick of being punished all the time, especially punished for taking breaks. I think that's a big one where people feel very punished for taking breaks. I can expand on that a little bit. So I had a couple friends come back during BFA, but they came back towards the end. Corruption was pretty cool, especially to them. But they couldn't actually do anything because they had to unlock the essences. They had to do all this other stuff. And it was too punishing for them, and they ended up quitting. So even though they actually thought the end of BFA was really good, like 8.3, they actually couldn't play because it just felt too punishing to them. They have to do all this other stuff. There's not good enough catch-up systems. There's not good enough like integrating you back into the game. If I come back in 9.3 and I have to start with my legendary, I'm like, what? How much soul ash do I need? How many soul cinders do I need? How many soul, whatever other soul type stuff is added to the game do I need just to make my first legendary? What? This is crazy. I have to run 10,000 Torghast. Some new things need to be added to, or not even added, just changed to allow people to come back when they do take a break, when they are fed up with the game, when they're tired of being punished until the punishment ceases. So you got to stop the adversarialness outside of the game. You have to stop the adversarial on this inside the game to a degree. Like I said, Painsmith is good. That's a good. It's good that that's punishing. It's good that grinding rank 1 in Gladiator is punishing. That's good. Like that. Please don't take this wrong. That is good punishment. You know, working towards an accomplishment is good punishment, right? Like you're punishing yourself by working hard. Working hard is a good punishment, kind of. But just clicking the wrong button and losing your shard of domination, that's not a good punishment. And there's always been things like this in the game going back. So let's try to put a halt on those things, in my opinion. And yeah, I know this video is very, very long, but these 3 things I think could help improve the game quite a bit. I think a lot of us are at just like the games at a nexus with, or Blizzard Activision's at a nexus with, hopefully getting better from here for the workers there. I think a lot of us players are at a nexus too, where you see Preach quitting. I think a lot of players are just ready to move on if you don't make the game better. So I hope you do. I love the game, and I hope it gets better. That's about it for this video. I do ask everyone to subscribe. And other than that, everybody have a good one.